Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this special Sustainability and Resiliency Week webinar. Today, we're joined by several staff from Senator Chris Murphy's office who are going to share an update on the federal landscape related to sustainability and climate change initiatives. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we will email it out, but you can also find this event along with recordings of our workshops, certification assistance, newsletter previews, and a great deal more on our Sustainable CT YouTube channel, and we will put a link to that channel in the chat. Before we dive in, I have to do the shameless plug for Sustainable CT communities. I have to let you know, just this morning, we had the opportunity to certify 30 Connecticut cities and towns. These communities have earned our Sustainable CT bronze, silver, or gold levels of certification, or maybe they achieved our climate leader designation. It's a great mix of communities, and if you're interested in seeing what they did to earn certification, you can check out our website. Everything that the towns did to get certified is publicly available. You can go in and see policies, programs, pictures of events, the works, and learn how to make your community more sustainable by using these communities as leaders and examples of what really good work can look like. We're so proud of our 2025 certifying class, and we look forward to celebrating their achievements on October 28th at the Goodspeed Opera House in East Haddam. And we hope you can join us. So we will put a link to the registration in the chat. It's a great opportunity to see what's happening out across the state and meet like-minded folks. So back to today. Today we're joined by four staff from Senator Murphy's office. We have Daniel Clayton, who's a legislative correspondent, Jameson Folk, a special projects manager, Jacob Ecke, a legislative assistant, and Aaron McBride, the senior outreach assistant for the senator's office. They're a great team, and we have a lot of ground to cover this afternoon. We will have a federal policy update. We'll have a look at the grantscape, and the team will give us insight as to what we should be aware of and different resources that might be available from the senator's office. I'd like to thank the senator's staff for making time to share with us today. We know that you have a lot on your plate, and we are extremely grateful to you for making time to connect. To the folks on the line listening in, please feel free to post questions in the chat as we go. We will pause halfway and at the end to take a few questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Daniel Clayton, who's going to get us started. Thank you so much, Daniel.
Well, good afternoon. And first and foremost, I want to thank Sustainable CT and all the many people who worked hard to, put this event together, and the tireless advocacy that Sustainable CT has had for many years. My name is Daniel, and I handle energy, environment, agriculture, public lands issues for Senator Murphy. And then along with myself and Jake, we handle transportation and labor policy. And I guess first and foremost, I think everyone knows that the government is now shut down. Link in the chat that kind of gives an overview on Senator Murphy's website as to answer some frequent questions that we have been having, and then later on in the program, my colleague Aaron will detail how constituent services and outreach is still operating even under a shutdown. I don't have a long and frankly a positive legislative update. There's been a lot going on the federal level. The biggest thing that relates to Connecticut is the Revolution Wind project. We're happy to see the DC court issue the injunction 2 weeks ago, and that construction has been resuming. Senator Murphy met with the Orsted CEO, and we've been in constant communication with the governor's team as well as the Orsted federal team. Again, hoping that that project will go online. Hoping that project will go online and will be up and running on schedule next year. Another thing that Senator Murphy has done is he and Senator Blumenthal sent a letter to the EPA last month opposing the resetting of an EPA rule that links greenhouse gases with endangering public health. And the EPA removing this rule significantly weakens the legal basis for federal climate regulations Also, with the shutdown, the EPA plans that they have posted on their website are pretty vague, and that's being generous. And even yesterday, it was posted that they plan to reduce operations by 90%. So again, I say all that to say that we're certainly in a tenuous time. We're advocating, doing the best we can here in DC. But then lastly, I just want to say that the work that you do on the ground is more important now than ever. And grassroots efforts to advocate for sustainable policies and and climate is incredibly valuable right now. So I'll be back for any questions. I know it wasn't the most positive update, and I'll kick it over to my colleague Jake.
Thanks, Daniel. And good afternoon, everyone. I want to echo what Daniel said and just saying thank you all for being here today. For being interested in what we have to share and for your advocacy. It's really important, especially during this time, that you keep up your advocacy. And I know a lot of times, given the administration and the current climate, it feels or can feel fruitless. And as Daniel alluded to, we just want to make sure you all know that it's not, and it's really important. And so thank you all for the great work that you have done. I don't work on climate, sustainability, energy, or anything like that directly, but I work on appropriations and budget and other issues related to federal funding for Senator Murphy's team. And so just kind of have a broader overview about where we've seen trends in federal funding. Not all of it super specific to the sustainability space, but kind of like to think I had my finger on the pulse of the broader landscape. As Daniel mentioned, we don't have the rosiest update from DC right now. Daniel mentioned this as well, but we're currently in a government shutdown due to a funding impasse that occurred obviously late last night, or I guess midnight this morning, because we haven't passed any sort of FY26 appropriations bills, no continuing resolution, no full year appropriation. And so as a result, we're currently shut down. And I think a lot of people have a lot of opinions or thoughts on how long it'll last. But the only thing I can really say with certainty is that it's very uncertain right now, and the path forward is unclear. Many agencies have released their contingency plans for how they plan to operate during the duration of the shutdown. Unfortunately, that means a lot of grant programs will slow down or won't be administered during the shutdown. In many cases, it depends on the reserves that the agency has available and kind of where grant agreements are. And as Daniel mentioned, again, we have a resource on our website that shares as much information as we have about those various agencies and what their plans will be. But would encourage anyone to reach out directly to us with questions, and we can do our best to run them down. Hopefully, the shutdown will not last long enough that many of these will become a real problem. But we, of course, are happy to answer any questions along the way. In prospects for FY26 funding bills, beyond the shutdown and after Congress eventually enacts a CR, whenever that is, also remain unclear. As I'm sure you all have seen, there's been a lot of back and forth about the FY26 appropriations process. The House has passed many of their appropriations bills. The Senate has passed many of them through the Appropriations Committee, but they haven't been considered on the floor yet. And so all this to say, we are a very long way from either passing individual appropriations bills or an omnibus spending bill that would actually fund the government for fiscal year 2026. I think the prospects are very dim, at least at this point. This continuing resolution that we can't seem to pass just highlights the division between the parties, and there's a lot of uncertainty about where we'll go from here. Without getting too deep into the details, Senator Murphy has been pretty concerned with the appropriations process, because many of the bills that we've seen, certainly in the House, but in the Senate as well, do very little or nothing at all to rein in some of the lawless use of funding that we have seen from the administration, and whether that's rescissions, the pocket rescissions, or the administration just closing down programs for which there's already appropriated money. Which is certainly a violation of appropriations law. And so, Senator Murphy has been very outspoken about that, and we have tried our very best to get provisions included in the appropriations bills to help rein in some of that lawlessness. But there's still a lot of uncertainty about where we'll go from here, and how we will, if we ever do, get a full year FY26 appropriations package passed. I suspect that it will still be months down the road, likely before the holidays or even into 2026, as we have done in prior years, since we're still so far apart. From the grants perspective, we have seen many grant programs continue to be held up. One of the most common ones that you all are likely familiar with, that we hear about a lot, is the BRIC program, Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities. That's an example of a program for which money has been appropriated, but the administration has decided, because they don't think it aligns with their policy views or their political views, to halt the program. I think there are certainly a few other programs that are in a similar boat, where we have a lot of recipients in Connecticut who don't have any clarity about when they will receive that funding. And the administration has been less than forthcoming, to say the least, with us when we try to check in on those grants or get information about when that money will get out the door. There are other programs. The transportation space comes to mind, where the relevant agencies, in this case DOT, is undertaking a review of the grants, and so they're reviewing, as best we understand it, they're reviewing these either agreements or applications, or the spend plans from the organizations who are slated to receive money, to make sure that they think it aligns. Recently, the Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments had a RAISE grant canceled because it was for multimodal transportation that the administration didn't think aligned with their views. And so we're obviously engaged in trying to get that money back out the door, because there was it's supposed to be an agreement in place and it's supposed to move forward. And it's obviously very difficult for communities, localities, organizations to plan ahead when there's so much uncertainty around grant funding. In the same vein, we have seen agencies, I know Federal Highway did this, we've seen agencies ask towns or nonprofits, whatever the case is, to revise some of their materials or application, whatever it is, to remove buzzwords that they don't like, to take out project components that they don't like, and try to bring them more in alignment with the policy aims of the administration. In some of those cases, I think they've been fairly straightforward changes. But if anyone is aware of or has experience with situations where the government is asking them to do a dramatic, reshaping or reshifting of their program, we would definitely encourage you to reach out and share those stories with us. And the last point I'll make on this, and then I'll stop talking, is that one encouraging piece is that we've heard there are a lot of career staff in these federal agencies who are still working diligently to try to get money out the door. And so it's not, dire straits in every case where Trump or Rust Vote or whomever are personally involved in canceling all these grants. I know there are a lot of good career staff members who are still committed to helping these money get out the door in these programs. And so we're doing our best to communicate with them about projects that either have question marks or haven't been moving forward as expeditiously as they should. Can't guarantee in every case that means we'll be able to get things moving or unstick things. But it's been encouraging to know that there are at least some staff members at many of these agencies who are still working to help get this grant money out the door. So that's my appropriations and grant update. Happy also to take any questions when there's time for that. And I don't know if Jameson was on, so I think I will kick it over to my colleague, Aaron.
Jessica, do you want to do some questions now, or what's your preference, just to make sure?
I have one question that came in via email to us earlier that I'd like to ask, because Jacob, I think it relates to what you were saying. So after 8 years of flood modeling, planning, design of a living shoreline in Longworth Harbor, and completion in 2024 of local, state, and federal permitting, the remaining balance of the City of New Haven's $25.1 million FEMA BRIC grant funding was terminated, preventing construction. So the question here is, litigation the only way to restore this funding approved by Congress?
I don't want to say it's the only way to restore the funding. However, we have run into brick wall, no pun intended. We have run into brick wall after brick wall related to the FEMA BRIC program. As you all may know, Senator Murphy is the ranking member on the Homeland Security Appropriations Subcommittee, which this program that is the subcommittee that appropriates funding for the BRIC program. Our counterparts at the Appropriations Committee, I know, have been in close contact with officials at FEMA. I know that they're also getting pressure from Republicans to restore the BRIC funding, because there are, just like Connecticut, there are also Republican states that have had these projects taken away, and in many cases, they're obviously important, good projects that should move forward regardless of the administration. But despite pressure from Republicans, despite pressure from House Democrats and House Republicans as well, the only feedback we've gotten from FEMA at this point is that they are continuing to review the BRIC program. So they haven't outright said this money is never coming, but they have placed a complete pause on it, are not getting any of the money out the door. And I know they're getting pressure from all sides, House and Senate, but that's their stance, is that they're still reviewing it. So I'm not a lawyer and, of course, can't offer legal advice, but, to the extent that litigation is possible, I think it's a good road to go down while the administration continues this review. But unfortunately, yeah, we've just run into brick walls from them on this program. And I know that the name, because, with resilience in the title, it was going to be a lightning rod for this administration. But I just remain hopeful and optimistic that through their review, they'll realize that this is, important for Republican states too, and will hopefully get the money out the door.
Great, thank you. So how about we go to you, Erin? And then folks, please do put questions in the chat. Actually, we just got one that again probably relates to you, Jake. So this is from Ruth. What can community organizations and advocacy groups best do to continue to elevate the importance of robust funding for EPA as negotiations continue on federal funding?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think one of the most useful things that Senator Murphy has done, and a lot of his colleagues has done, is go down to the Senate floor and share stories about how these dramatic cuts that the administration has made, whether it's cuts to funding for grant programs or laying off staff at many of these agencies, the way that that is affecting people on the ground. I think it's really easy for the administration and their folks in DC to just cut $1 million here and $1 million there and 1,000 employees there without really understanding the ramifications. And so being able to share those stories publicly is really helpful. And so would encourage folks to reach out to Daniel or Aaron or myself with stories about how these cuts have affected you. And then similarly, I think positive stories about what different groups or municipalities have been able to do with federal funding, whether it was during the Biden administration or at any other point. Sharing positive stories about what you've been able to do with that funding is also really impactful. It's oftentimes better to share those good stories than to talk about the negative ones. And so that's another one. And then it sounds cliche, but I just think keeping the pressure up, particularly on some of the moderate Republican members, to preserve some of this funding is really important. Senator Collins, that we may have disagreed with many things she's done over the years and different funding decisions that she makes, she's has a reputation for being a bit more reasonable than many of her Republican colleagues, and in her position as chair of the Appropriations Committee is definitely able to have a lot of influence over a lot of these funding decisions. And so I think reaching out to her, even though we aren't her constituents, is another good avenue to go down as well.
Great. We have got more questions for you. They're coming in. So states are getting major disaster declarations, but it's unclear whether these states are requesting HMGP funds, and if so, are they receiving those funds? These are funds for this for a state after a federally declared disaster, and they're requested by the particular state that was impacted.
It's a great question. I don't know off the top of my head if this funding is flowing right now or not. We can certainly look and get an answer about that and get back to you all. I can tell you we have a little bit of visibility into the FEMA Disaster Relief Fund, which we understand should continue to operate during the shutdown, which is good news. But this specific program, I'm not entirely sure, but we'd be happy to run down an answer for you all and share it after the webinar.
Thanks. All right, folks, you're doing great with the questions. Keep them coming to the chat. While you're thinking of to Erin, who's going to talk a little bit about the path forward and what she's seeing office side of things.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Erin McBride. I'm based in our Connecticut office, and I'm our senior outreach assistant. I cover the eastern part of the state for the senator, but work closely with my colleagues across the state. Just going to dive a little deeper into what Daniel and Jake referenced on the government shutdown and just how that impacts constituents here in Connecticut. So due to the government shutdown, our offices in both DC and Connecticut are closed to the public, but you can still call our office. Although responses may be delayed depending on the influx. I've been hearing the phones go off all day. So, every call counts and every call is tracked in our systems. Mail will not be able to be answered until the shutdown ends. And staff also cannot help arranging Capitol tours or fulfill flag requests, just as some general notes. Casework requests, I mean, it's not directly related to sustainability, but I mean, every single person working in whatever field it is, is a constituent that might be utilizing constituent services, resources in our office. So you can still open cases and inquire about cases within our office, but we are kind of working with the circumstances of federal agencies being closed during the shutdown, as well as potential agency staff furloughs that are occurring. I'll put the link though in case anyone requests assistance or needs it. So you can still do that at this time. And then I'll also put our office phone numbers just in case, again, any questions come up in the interim. And then I wanted to share some contacts in our Connecticut office for folks to be able to utilize. So I have it listed by congressional district. So we have a person for every district in the state. Also I listed our economic development director, Ariel, in case you're ever looking to apply for a federal grant, obviously not during times of shutdowns, but any other time, our office is always happy to write letters of support for any kind of federal grant initiative. And then I'll also put Jake, Daniel, and Jameson's emails in the chat so you have some DC contacts around these issues. But from there, I'm going to go into some CT highlights over the last few weeks. So as Daniel mentioned, the Revolution Wind stop work order has been lifted. So obviously a really big deal because this project was 80% almost completed during the time of the stop work order. But it's expected to provide 704 megawatts of carbon-free power to New England, which is a huge deal. The Connecticut delegation remains strongly behind that and monitoring it closely. But also this year, Millstone Power Station's Unit 2 marked its 50th anniversary on Monday, which is pretty exciting. The celebrations highlighted the decades-long role of providing carbon-free electricity to nearly half of the state. I know now that they are in current negotiations around extending the license for another 20 years. So another thing we're kind of continuing to watch because obviously that's a pretty big deal in terms of trying to stabilize electricity costs here in Connecticut, which we hear a lot about. On a more positive note, I thought I'd just share some federal dollar highlights over the years that Senator Murphy has supported around sustainability and climate. There's been millions of dollars distributed across the state for brownfield cleanups and the Brownfields Revolving Loan Grant Fund, everywhere from New London to Waterbury to Killingly, Norwalk, East Hampton, just as a few states. Over $500,000 to Hartford to fund solid waste infrastructure for recycling, over $200 million or $2 million to Stanford for a food scrap collection compost program and other recycling efforts. We've seen millions of dollars go to Bridgeport, Waterbury, Hartford, and New Haven for environmental justice grants. We've seen some great electric bus awards go out across the state that was led by the Biden administration. And we've also seen some really great CT climate pollution reduction planning costs. I'll put this link for our website here. We have a grant tracker where you can kind of see the range of different types of grants that the senator has helped deliver to constituents and organizations across Connecticut. Kind of going now into more what our office, at least here in Connecticut, and I know DC, it's been pretty reflective there of what we've been hearing and been contacted about by constituent groups. A lot of the initial concerns I'd say in the first 6 months and even now was that grants were either being frozen or that there is withdrawing of funds. Sorry, I just saw a question come in. But also we've just heard a lot about inconsistent federal agency communication. So kind of just echoing Jake's point, what's really helpful to us is that when you get updates from a federal agency or a particular grant that you were previously awarded funding, it is so helpful when we're contacted about it so that we can be kind of in the loop. It's a kind of odd circumstances where we're not really being alerted about these changes happening from the executive branch, but instead constituents and community leaders have been really integral in us being able to track what the federal landscape looks like in terms of these grant programs. We have heard a lot about environmental and climate justice grants being canceled, as well as electric vehicle infrastructure dollars. I think many of you know probably that research in higher education as a whole has been heavily under attack for several months now. So that's another thing that our office is closely monitoring. So if you guys have any, research grants or something like that getting canceled, please let us know. Also, I would just say through, our general work in Connecticut, we hear a lot of concerns about small scale farmers in Connecticut facing challenges, accessing affordable land, and just kind of just leaves leasing as the only option, which it's very difficult for farmers to be able to invest in a farm business tenure when they're leasing land that could be kind of taken from them at any point. So there's a really interesting study that the Connecticut Department of Agriculture and the Connecticut Land Conservation Council did on farm access and ownership that I'll share in the chat. I wonder if these are just going to Jessica, are these also going to the attendees or just the hosts and panelists? Okay, all right, I'll add those after Jameson goes, but
Yeah,
the
we'll
other
get them
thing
to
that
you all.
the other thing that I'll just share quickly is that the Northwestern Connecticut Affordable Housing and Conservation Strategy, in partnership with the Housatonic Valley Association and Center for Housing Opportunity, released a really awesome study on kind of how those two things can be intersectional. Because obviously a huge thing in Connecticut is we're in a bit of a housing crisis, but also we are a state that is really great about preserving land, trying to support small scale farmers. So just a really interesting study that they worked on. So with that, I'll pass it to Jameson. Unless Jessica, you want to take a second? I know there's some questions that came in.
Yeah, Jameson, you just arrived, so we'll give you 1 second to breathe. I want to thank you for joining us too. We know you're super busy today. So we have a couple questions that came in. So one, what will the impact of the shutdown be on advancing public works projects funded by the bipartisan infrastructure law, which ends on 9/30/2026?
I can take this one. I think it depends on the duration of the shutdown. If the shutdown ends up being relatively brief, most of the agency's contingency plans indicate that things will operate more or less as normal from a grant space. I know that many agencies have said they'll have like a skeleton staff available to approve payments and drawdowns. But I think it depends on the duration of the shutdown. I anticipate if it remains or if it ends up being relatively short, and anything that is on track should continue to be on track and shouldn't be disrupted much by that. But I think that could change if the shutdown ends up going for a prolonged period.
Thanks, Jake. Another question. The FEMA HMG program grants were due in November 2025 to CT Demis. Will these FEMA grants be delayed by the shutdown, do you anticipate?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure with that program, but we can reach out to someone at FEMA and ask. I know they're also supposed to maintain something of a staff who can hopefully get back to us and share. And if not, oftentimes some of our colleagues at the Appropriations Committee who speak more regularly with the people who administer grants will know. So we're happy to track down an answer about that.
Wonderful. And I don't think I see any more questions. Aaron, oh wait, here we go. No more questions. Aaron, you're adding a lot of great content for folks to grab in the chat. So good contact information, different resources for people. So everyone, please do check out the chat, grab those resources if they're helpful to you. And now, Jameson, I'd like to turn it over to you if you have anything you'd like to share with the audience today.
Yeah, hey everybody. Sorry I'm a little late. I was working on a different project and was on a call that ran a little long. But I appreciate Sustainable CT for hosting this and for asking our office to to take some time to give you a briefing. It's a weird time of year to give a briefing. Obviously, those questions are indicative of just the weird state of the world that we're in right now. But obviously, like Jake said, hopefully this shutdown doesn't last too long, and we can get back to business as usual, whatever that kind of means. All that I ever really wanted to talk about is the ways that this weird world has sort of been going on for a couple months now, really, and that a lot of the grants that were approved under the Biden administration that went towards things like sustainability and renewable energy, even cycling infrastructure have been paused, some canceled, and in other ways disrupted. One of the ones that we saw recently that was in the news was NVCOG, Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments got an award, pretty sizable award to create some new bike infrastructure through, I don't remember exactly where it went, but from Naugatuck. And it's been canceled for now. I don't know exactly how that will play out, but those types of actions are very disruptive, and obviously they impact the sort of long-term sustainability of folks in Connecticut. They impact people getting to work. They impact people, in their recreation. And it does seem like there is a target by the administration on infrastructure projects that have anything to do with cycling or pedestrian safety, as opposed to, car infrastructure, which you know, they're going right ahead with. There's some other grants that were canceled, all over the state, really. Southern Connecticut State University, and UConn, research grants, different Department of Agriculture grants that were paused, which sort of disrupted things for food share and others. And a lot of that early on was just disruptive, and it sort of made the funding landscape pretty uncertain for a lot of people who maybe were trying to apply for new grants for either the current fiscal year or the upcoming fiscal year. And that kind of thing can kind of cause a chilling effect on programs to jumpstart. It can cause people to want to fund other types of projects, or people who work in the sustainability space to want to try to work on other things in the meantime, which I don't really think our world has time to sort of pause on sort of environmental policy, to try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and the like. So that's sort of all I really wanted to mention. I don't obviously know what was mentioned before I joined the call, so I apologize again for joining a little late, but I'm sure that Daniel, Jake, and Aaron gave you, a good rundown. So thank you again.
Thank you, Jameson. And don't apologize at all. So we have another question here in the chat, hoping that the shutdown does not last long. A hopeful note asking this for our town residents who are concerned about higher incidences of flooding in their backyards with the climate change. Are there any specific programs targeting this for residents? This person works on Bethel, Connecticut's Sustainability Commission. Who may this person reach out to get more information?
Well, Aaron put in the chat there, some of our folks on outreach. I think that's usually the best way to get in touch with our team, and then we can always tie them into the appropriate legislative staffer who works on this. In this case, Daniel or Jake may be the best person, but in terms of Bethel, that would be Genevieve in our state office. I think Aaron put those at the top there.
Yeah, and I'm sending an email to Jessica right now with all the information I'm putting in the chat that our team has put in the chat, just so it's making sure nothing's missed for you guys.
Yeah, we'll get everyone covered with all of this information, and we'll also send a recording of the webinar. Other questions from folks, please just pop it in the chat. I have something that just came in related to the question we just got, kind of. I'm wondering if you can discuss any of the updates on data and tracking of climate data, environmental data, pollution data. What's happening? What do you think will happen over the next couple of years in that regard?
So what we had heard probably about 2, 3 months ago was that the EPA was kind of wiping data and a lot of the mentions about climate change, sustainability, et cetera, on their website. They were cherry picking and removing, again, something incredibly concerning for us, given the fact that they're molding the data to best shape the narrative that they want to portray.
Thanks, Daniel. So another question from the chat. Any idea if pending grant applications with climate change language will be allowed to be amended, or if they will be outright rejected under the current administration? This person knows EJ language was a denial trigger at the federal level lately, and I have to scroll down. but not at the state level?
It's a good question. I'm not entirely sure if they'll be outright rejected, um, or if there'll be opportunity for edits to be made. However, I do think that those will probably raise red flags with people in the administration. I know that they, in many cases, are specifically looking for this type of language. However, as I mentioned earlier, in some cases, the administration seems to be allowing groups to make edits to their application. I know that James and I have spoken to a couple of groups recently who have had a bit more of a back and forth with the administering grant agency to kind of get the application to a place that the agency was comfortable with. I think it would depend on probably the grant program and the agency. So I can't make any blanket statements or guarantee that anything will be rejected. But it seems to be the case that some of those are certainly raising red flags. Just hopefully they will engage in some of that back and forth and allow groups to make changes.
Another question. There is supposed to be a hearing today with the EPA about about greenhouse gas reporting requirements, but the person doesn't know if that moved forward because of the shutdown. I think maybe just wondering if it's going to happen, or is that something that is paused?
Ruth, I do know that some hearings did take place today and that others were canceled in regards to the shutdown. But if there is any update, we'll make sure to contact you.
So let's just pretend there's no shutdown and it's normal. Um, are there any climate or sustainability grants that you know might be coming up in the next year that folks should keep an eye out for? And if so, any tips for success?
I can speak a little bit on tips for success generally, and then I don't know if Daniel has any ideas about um, grant programs specific to those policy areas. Um, I hate saying this because I know that it means removing mentions of things that are priorities to us, to Senator Murphy, and to all of you. Um, but the advice that I have given, groups who have asked similar questions, is just try your best in grant applications to avoid things that seem like political or left wing or democratic buzzwords. I know things like sustainability, like climate change, global warming, things that to everyone on this call, are real, are things that are worth mentioning, things that are worth addressing. I just know that this administration is looking for any reason they can to ding people's applications, to reject them. And so I think to the best of your ability, um, talk about grants or what you will do with grants in as general terms as you can, and try to avoid some of those things that you might consider buzzwords. And it's obviously an art, not a science. And so, we would just offer to all of you that if you are working on an application, if you have questions about any of the language, we'd be happy to get on a phone call and talk through it, to make sure that we're helping you all be in as competitive of a place as possible. But that's just kind of the advice I've given. We know that this administration is diametrically opposed to us on a lot of these important issues. And so it's just tricky, but we have to try our best, I guess, to navigate that in this time and still try to get funding for as many of these initiatives as we can. So again, I know it's not perfect, but we'd be happy to work with all of you on ways to finesse the language to be as strong as possible.
Yeah, I just want to echo Jake's comments. Nothing specific comes to mind, but again, um, really watch out for what we have been calling the Certal F Brigade. They just want to go through these grant applications and look for these specific buzzwords. A constituent had even flagged for us that the word biodiversity had gotten flagged on one of their grant applications. So again, not optimistic, but definitely tailor grant applications for the times that we are in.
And our office is also happy to write letters of support for federal grant applications. So that's something that Ariel tackles. those applications or those letters rather can be helpful in normal times. So it doesn't hurt to ping us if any of your groups are looking to apply for any type of federal funding to just give us a heads up. We can try to coordinate a letter of support from the entire state delegation, if not just from our office, and potentially answer some questions along the way.
I'm going to ask a question, Daniel. It's a policy question. So we've seen a lot of policy changes in the past several months. Looking forward, what are some items, agenda items, topics, themes on the table that you're particularly concerned about related to environment, sustainability, or climate change?
I'd say the biggest thing is the tax credits that went away under the big beautiful bill. Also, that combined with the attacks to renewable energy. Again, not only Revolution Wind off the coast of Rhode Island and Connecticut has been under review, but also in Virginia, I believe there's 5 or 6 other projects in which the Department of the Interior is looking at right now. And then also more so out west, how the Department of the Interior has opened up more land for oil and gas drilling, which again we have some systematic problems with. So again, not the most positive outlook on things, but all things that we're certainly watching and monitoring and speaking out against.
All right, so let's flip it. Is there anything positive that you anticipate coming up? Any additional protections? Anything at all in the next couple of years that you're thinking about?
I hate to be a Debbie Downer this whole call, but I just I I don't and I know this call isn't in particularly political, but I think if the Dems are able to retake the House and by some stroke of luck retake the Senate, I think there'll be a lot more oversight and power and levies that we will hold to put forth and kind of shape these sustainable policies. But unfortunately, during the short term and even long term, just not an overall positive outlook.
Okay. Um, we do have another question in the chat. So this is not a climate or environmental question, but it aids the towns greatly. Do you know if the state local cybersecurity grant funds are being held? This particular town was awarded a FY22 SLCGP and FEMA Homeland Security Grant. So they're just wondering about that.
I also don't know specifically that grant program, but we're happy to ask someone and get an answer as quickly as possible.
And I just put in the chat, it looks like on the FEMA page, they have state administrative agency contacts for every state. So it looks like that'll be the person in Connecticut that you should contact.
Great, thanks, Erin. Other questions, folks? We have our experts here. This is the time to pick their brain. What are you wondering about? I'm going to ask another hopeful question because it's a nice day outside, regardless of what's happening in the world. What are you hopeful about? What are you working on that's really getting you excited in this realm? What are you trying to push forward? I mean, is a lot of maybe responding, or is there anything proactive that you're able to move forward as a team that you're excited about sharing?
I don't know about my colleagues, but this whole year, given everything, I've been really taken aback and very hopeful about just the absolute sheer amount of grassroots support for climate, energy, public lands. So many of these policies that people have been coming to our office, writing, calling, speaking to us about. So that has been a hope during this time. So.
I won't say exactly what we're working on, but in my role as special projects manager, we're writing a few reports, some of which have to do with sort of what Daniel said, public lands um, and some more environmental concerns. And uh, before we started writing these, it was clear that there were a lot of attacks on these things that I think people didn't know about because there was just so much bad news in the sort of early, few months of the administration. It was hard to sort of focus on any one thing at one time. So part of what we're going to try to do is shed light on some of the things that the administration is doing that we disagree with, sort of, allow people to sit with it and then also write, you know, what we think is actually a good policy change. If we can get power in the next couple of years, what we could do to make progress on these things that we know constituents, that we know people in Connecticut really, really care about. Um, and sort of a positive way forward to sort of show the alternative universe that we could be living in, kind of thing. So my colleagues are all working on those reports alongside me, and hopefully we'll get some of those out in the next couple of weeks, couple of months.
Jake, Aaron, what are you hopeful about?
Go ahead, Aaron.
I would just say it's been really impressive in the last year seeing how different sectors are working together and just different nonprofit leaders and community leaders are working together, standing across town boundaries or even like, again, the scope of what their, nonprofit or group does just to figure out, creative solutions and addressing you know, grant challenges and concerns. I think that's like really what makes Connecticut so unique is we're a pretty small state, but we're really different in each part of the state. So I think just seeing that cross kind of sector and state line or part of the state kind of collaboration has been really impressive. And I think it's just a testament that we are stronger when we work together. So I think that's something that's made me hopeful and just knowing how strong our community leaders are trying to continue to do this great work in all different kinds of sectors, but especially in sustainability. I mean, we have so many beautiful preserved lands. We're on Long Island Sound. We're investing in green alternatives for, energy. So it's really great to just see how groups are working together to kind of address these really big issues impacting the whole country, but right here in our small state, Connecticut. So
And I'll just add, very similar to what Daniel and Aaron said. I've worked for Senator Murphy for about 5 or so years now, and there's no doubt that since the new administration, took office in January, the people are as engaged and as focused as they've ever been. We have more visitors coming to the Capitol, more people coming into our office wanting to talk to us about their priority policy areas. I work on a bunch of other domestic policy issues, and I think across my whole portfolio, I'm just hearing from more constituents, having more meetings with advocacy groups here in DC than I've ever had before. And it's obviously unfortunate that we're in this situation and that we're seeing so many policies that we care about being dismantled, and see an administration that's often doing things that we vehemently disagree with. But if there's a silver lining in that and something that makes me optimistic for the future, it's that a lot more people are engaged, they're paying attention, and they're making sure that their voices are heard. And so that's a good thing. It's good that there are a lot more people here, and that they're focused on trying to protect the things that we care about.
Well, thank you all. So another question, what are good, accurate resources to stay informed on sustainability initiatives? And if I may, we have a monthly newsletter at Sustainable CT that Jennifer, we'd love to have you sign up for, and one of my colleagues can put a link to how to do that in the chat. But basically, our homepage, all the way at the bottom, you can sign up. But to my esteemed federal colleagues, what resources do you have for Jennifer?
I guess like directly in Connecticut, I would say to, continue to rely on the organizations that are doing the work and are doing the data collection. So, I mean, Sustainable CT is the obvious one, but you have Yukon Circa, Save the Sound, Sea Grant, Sierra Club, Connecticut Audubon Society, Audubon CT, because they're two different things. Like there's so many amazing groups, like your local land trust. I mean, these are people that are, the just so integrated in the work. I mean, the Housatonic, groups, the 8 Mile Rivers and Scenics, like these are all groups, the Last Green Valley, that are so immersed in this work and are have the data to back it up. Are again working across the state with their partners. We've had groups from different sides of the state reach out to us as one unified voice, saying we want to meet with you to talk about state policy or federal policy. So, like I would say, yeah, like people are putting some stuff in the chat too. Like those are the groups that I think really have a good pulse, especially at the localized level of Connecticut. Um, and I
I'd
think
also
CTD.
just, yeah. Oh, I was going to say, yeah. So deep, I was going to also mention Data Haven in New Haven, based out of New Haven, but they do sort of statewide data reports. It's really good. I think they have some programming or some reporting on environmental issues. They definitely have reporting on a host of other types of issues. So worth checking them out too.
Yeah, and then those are great local resources, and I check Bloomberg Green too many times a day. So if you ever want, a national and even local outlook, that's a great resource that I look at often.
Amazing. Okay, so another question. Is the introduced FEMA Act of 2025 HR 4669 something to be hopeful about, or what are your general impressions?
Yeah, this is a tricky one, and anyone that knows me knows that I tend to be a pessimist, particularly when it comes to Congress passing um, laws at all. Basically, um, I'm not totally sure about it. I wouldn't, but I want to give false hope that there are really good prospects for it to pass. And the first reason I'll say that is just because we pass almost nothing realistically, like in the Senate and the House. Aside from must-pass legislation, I guess the House does pass a lot of messaging bills, but it's very rare for standalone legislation like that to make it through both houses of Congress and get signed by the president. Just by the nature of the way Congress works, and the need to have quite a bit of time reserved on the floor of the Senate to get things like that passed. Um, but my particular concern, I think, with this bill is that, as I understand it, the bill will kind of reform FEMA and make updates, changes, programs, and such. And the president, I think, has said that FEMA shouldn't exist, and so I'm just a little bit bearish on the prospects of President Trump signing legislation to like reauthorize, reform, and improve FEMA and have it become its own independent department. When he thinks that the mission of the agency is I don't know, something that shouldn't exist to begin with. Um, Again, I tend to be pessimistic, and I hope that I'm wrong about it. But we're happy to stay in touch with the bill or answer more specific questions. But I think, yeah, having a president who's hostile toward the depart or the agency to begin with is a bit of a precarious place to start for this bill.
And one more question. We kind of touched on this with contacting moderate representatives and senators. Just your thoughts on, if somebody cares about the natural environment, cares about climate change, cares about sustainability, and wants to see policies at the federal level that reflect their values, how would you suggest that that individual participates in the process in the most meaningful way?
I think if they're on this call, they're certainly doing it. They're being involved, but then also, as you referenced earlier, being involved with these national organizations who reach out to these purple state and red state Republicans and make sure that they are telling their representatives that these policies are important to them. That goes very far. Rather than us reaching out to the EPA. Someone like Senator McCormick or another Republican senator reaching out to the EPA regarding something.
I'd also just add that so much attention is given to the federal government and how much you know environmental policy is global and national, but so much of it is also hyper localized, right? Like cleaning up your own stream in your backyard or your beach or your park is super important to the ways that you interact with the environment day to day. at the state level too, right? Like state policies are, hugely helpful, and a lot easier to enact than sort of the slow grinding of the federal government, even in normal times. That's disregarding partisanship in a shutdown. So, I think Senator Murphy talks about this a lot, but voting is the sort of most obvious way to get involved in your sort of community, but it's also both one of the easiest and um, one of the sort of uh, how do I say this? It's something that it only comes up once a year at most. So going to your town hall and advocating for what you support is really important. Um, Showing up at school board meetings if it's education policy, showing up at zoning meetings if it's zoning policy, um, and both of those things can intersect with environmental policy, of course, too. Um, Speaking with your state legislators, knowing who they are and making sure to advocate for the bills that they support if they, match your opinions or voicing your opposition to them and when they don't, that kind of stuff is hugely important. And then obviously the sort of next step is if you don't feel like the people that are representing you are truly representing your values, you can always run for something. You can run for a local election and you can run for state or statewide or obviously federal elections too. But at that hyper local level, they can be really important. And some of those things aren't political elections, right? Your Shellfish Commission could be a relatively easy way for you to get involved in, coastal management, or your Parks Commission, right? That kind of stuff can be hugely helpful, and it does take more time, but because it takes more time, you probably would have a bigger impact.
Well, thank you so much, Jameson. And that's Sustainable CT. So if anyone on the call is wondering how to connect with your town's sustainability team, we're happy to make those matches. Just contact us at info@sustainablect.org and we'll pair you right away. If your town's not registered in the program yet, we're happy to discuss more about what that could look like and what the process involves. But yeah, it's all about doing the work. So we're here to help you do the work you want to do in your communities to make healthier, more resilient, more equitable cities and towns in our state. We've got this. Today, we're celebrating 30 towns that have taken monumental steps forward in advancing sustainability. We'll continue to celebrate those towns for the rest of the year. They're doing amazing work. There's so much good stuff happening in Connecticut. There is a lot to be hopeful about, and it's because of the work that you're doing. And to our team at Senator Murphy's office, it's because of the work that you're doing too. We're grateful for what you're up to in Washington. Keep up the good fight. Thank you for spending your time with us today. We know on all days, you made time to carve out to connect with us and our network. So we're deeply appreciative. And we wish you well. We're all in this together, and let's go forth and save the world, people. We've got this.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
All
Thank you
right.
all.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Bye bye.
everyone.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.